Call the meeting to order. We'll start the City Council work session. Ron Whitlatch.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council. We have tonight before you a work session on our water treatment plant project. I'm going to kind of give you an update. We've got, I believe you got the slides in front of you. So basically the purpose of tonight's work session will be to, first of all, if I can make that work, give you an update on where we're at with bid package 1, which is the utilities, which we just started. Kind of give you an update on that. Give you an update on bid package 2, which we rejected those bids. We'll give you the bids versus the cost estimate. Kind of give you a breakdown on that. Some of the concepts that we've come up with that to reduce the project cost. Give you an update on funding, on where we're at on that. Moving forward in our proposal to use CMGC contracting, and then respond to any questions that you may have. But as we're going through, please feel free to ask questions as we're going through. It's meant to kind of give you an informative session and let you know where we're at and where we're proposing to head, and answer any questions that you might have. So this is Wayne Grush with Corello Engineers. I'm sure you guys have all met him. He's been here before. And he will handle some of this, and I will handle some of it. I'll first start off with giving you an update on bid package 1. We started this week, excavation about Russell Drive and the railroad tracks, installing storm sewer, getting that ready, and then they're going to start sanitary sewer. So Russell Drive is closed. I haven't heard a lot of feedback from the community in terms of negativeness. I'm sure you have. That's good. That's good as long as it's going to you guys and not me. I'm happy with that. Just to let you know, we issued notice to everybody 3 different times. We sent out, I want to say, somewhere in the neighborhood of 550 mailers to that whole area. Let them know what was going on. We did that 3 different times with the timing. Held a neighborhood meeting. I've had signs up. It's been posted on our website, social media. So I believe we've hit everything as best we can, and we'll adjust as we need to. But if you're hearing things out there that people are not liking other than just the standard, hey, you know, I don't want your cars going through our neighborhood, because there's really no good route. It's unfortunate, but let us know, and we can do adjustments.
What was the tone of the public meeting?
It actually was pretty good. We sent out, again, 500 and some odd mailers. We had probably, I'm going to say, somewhere around 40 folks that attended. The biggest things we had were folks in the Mountain River Drive area not wanting the traffic diverted around in a detour. You know, I mean, unfortunately, that's the only thing you can do. But short of that, there wasn't really any negativeness. Most of it was questions. You know, am I going to be able to get to my driveway, and those type of questions. So. Overall, it went well.
I was just remembering that I can't go that way now.
Well, I drive that way every day too, and I have to remember as well. So, yeah, I know. So, hopefully, it's going well, and as people get acclimated to it, we'll hopefully some of those complaints will start to back off, and our contractor is really good about helping people remember. Really? What was that? Who's that? Do they? Getting a lot more traffic? Well, that's good. See, we're helping the economy out while we're doing this.
A permanent road closure.
Yeah. Oh, good. So short of that, you know, we haven't had any. Most everybody's been really good to work with. I mean, we're still getting easements from some folks out there that everybody's been great to work with on that piece of it too. So. Schedule-wise, we're looking at the first phase of this, probably up to the first Mountain River entrance, out to the railroad tracks, being closed to through traffic till probably right around when school starts, and then we'll take it off the rest, you know, between the 2 Mountain River drives, probably till October-ish, November, and then my guess is they'll wrap up sometime right after the first of the year. So. So far, so good. Things are going well. As with any construction project, especially underground utilities, you dig things in places that you think that were there, and it turns out that they're not there. And you have to adjust, but we'll accommodate that. Canal crossing, that's the biggie. So I eliminated both of the borings that were supposed to happen under the canal from this contract. Not necessarily due to Albany, but there's FERC requirements and there's SHPO, State Historic Preservation Office requirements that Albany and FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, didn't feel were met. We have a 60-day review time with FERC, and we turned our plans in plenty of time to get a 60-day review. They did not like the design that we came up with. They couldn't tell us why they didn't like it, other than the fact that they wanted us to do something different, and they didn't know what they wanted us to do different. So we have since put some more geotechnical information together, are putting together a different design for it, same boring concept, but their concern was that the canal bottom would fail with the jack and bore method. I don't think it would. We've done it all over town. It's just them being over anxious or whatever you might call it. So we have another 60-day review on that, which has not been turned into them. So therefore, rather than risk having a contractor sit out there and request delays and damages and whatnot, we pulled the plug on the bores. So we'll build everything up to the canal and get that piece done, and then if we have to, we'll add the bores to either the water treatment plant project when it goes out or separately contracted, one of the two. But it didn't make any sense to pay additional dollars out for sitting around and waiting, and I'm not convinced that we'll get through this FERC thing in 60 days again. So they seem to be very difficult to work with. I don't envy Albany for having to do that. That's kind of the boat that they're in. So after seeing that, it's interesting. So anyway, that's kind of where we're at on the project to date.
Ron, there's two crossings it's going to cross?
Yeah, so as part of the agreement that we just signed with Albany, one of them was to upgrade the outlet pipe of Cheetah Lake to there, and that's one of them.
Oh, okay.
So we incorporated that into this project to get them at the same time. And then the other one is for the raw water line. So both of those are delayed. And Albany's aware of that, and we've been working with Albany staff, and unfortunately they feel the same we do, and you know, we're here with a federal agency, and how do you get through it?
Did they specify one or the other that was a problem, like maybe the Cheetah Lake one over the...
No, it was both. They didn't like, we had a 3 to 4 foot depth between bottom of canal and top of casing. They wanted more, but they really couldn't say why, so we've deepened that a little bit. And then they were concerned about the head pressure in the canal, basically with water flowing through the canal if we had a breach in the bottom of the canal, draining the canal. I contend that your biggest breach probably would have been about 6 inches. It's just not going to happen. But so what they want us to do is basically take and pipe it. So we'll put in temporary culverts in the canal, sandbag it, build this head wall so that we can dry out the area and watch it, and then bore under it. So basically, yeah, essentially, you know, with that. But we have to be really careful with that because that being a historical feature, everything's got to be temporary, and you've got to tread lightly. So it's interesting. It's going to cost us more money. It's unfortunate, but we're kind of at the mercy of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. If they won't give us a permit, we can't very well do it. So,
where's the raw crossing at?
The raw water?
Yeah.
They're about 50 feet apart or so right there at the Cheetah Lake entrance, just right there close to that bridge. They're both right there. Yeah, we've got them fairly close together for mobilization reasons with the contractor and whatnot. So, yeah, they're right there. So that's in a nutshell where we're at with bid package 1. Going well, things are moving along, and from there I will kind of let Wayne take it over, kind of give you an update, go through some of the project costs, some of the elements that we can do to maybe reduce cost, and then I'll take it back from there, and please feel free to ask any questions.
So
There you go.
the first slide is just a reminder. I was on to start with, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That where we are, I guess, or that we had 7 bids the day opening. Actually a pretty tight bid pool, and the low bid was nearly 40% higher than our estimate. And as I've shared with Ron, we understand, I think, fully the position that that places the city in. And I can tell you that we're disappointed in the fact that our estimate was that much lower than the bid, especially with having worked on the project for quite a bit of time, making sure that price and decisions were based on some pricing. And we have done quite a bit of work to try to discover why those bids came in so much higher. And you want to go to the next slide for me. That the answer lies in pretty much the same thing that we find ourselves in occasionally, whether we're high or low, and that's that our cost data, as good as it is, isn't really reflecting the current market conditions for some of the project elements. As just a little background, we had, in essence, 4 estimates during and throughout the project. We did estimates in the work that you had done during a facilities planning exercise with H2M on the project. And we also benchmarked it against 2 projects that are fairly recent, one in Park City, Utah, which is a close example of this, or parallel of your project. That was a design bid build project. And then our firm actually built a water plant for Clifton, Colorado as a design build project. And that has been in operation for about a year and a half. So we thought we had some good pricing and some good basis for our prices. We use the engineering news record. I think a lot of firms use that for the escalating costs to our area from other areas across the country. And frankly, that shows about a 12% increase in pricing through a period of time of where your project was. That's really not reflective of what the pricing model is for a lot of the building industry. And that proved totally incorrect for the building trade industries. And it's unfortunate, but as we've talked to our architect, they've experienced that on similar building projects.
Can you differentiate, and maybe you want to do it now or later, materials versus labor?
Yeah, I'll get into that. Yes,
Great.
There's so the bid in the bids, in looking at them, those elements and components that came in line very well with our estimate were the raw water pump station, the intake, and the treatment plant, process equipment, and site work. And the reason for that, and I believe the reason that we saw 7 bidders at our table, is those elements are all associated with heavy construction in our industry. And they're limited to our industry. There's a lot of concrete work, but there's a lot of process and mechanical work. We actually call for quotes on that equipment and those type of things, and we can get pretty close on those. The raw water pumps, while we don't use all of the quoted price they give us because we know there's competition, that might float down a little bit. We have a pretty good handle on those type of elements. The elements that didn't come in on the bid, and I've got further breakdown on this for you, are those that are associated with the building practices and the skilled trades. And the building envelope, the building size itself, and the type of building wall systems we used in that came in substantially higher than what our estimate was. The other ones that came in higher are those that are in the, what I call the skilled trade industries, the plumbing, the HVAC, electrical instrumentation, and then these finishes and coatings that we put on. We use some pretty high quality coatings for chemical resistance, And then there's also coatings and that are used for membrane, for water sealants and that type of thing. Those were substantially out of line with our estimate. And I've got a couple of slides in here that just give you some examples of that. This is our estimate, engineer's estimate. So the table identifies the project components and elements, where our estimated number was, where the low bid or average estimates were from the bidders, the difference, and then basically a reason or what we believe the reason is why. So on the HVAC system, we had a very efficient system. For the plant itself, it was based on a heat exchange system versus an air. That turned out to be extremely high. The low bidder told us that, in fact, he was going to use his own people to do the piping work because the HVAC contractor wouldn't pick that pricing up, and it would have been farther out of line than this was in just putting that piece of the project together. Electrical and INC, we use smart MCCs so you could put them on a grid. We also used a pretty robust SCADA system, and we had specified a 3-year service contract in that so that the city wouldn't be in the position of having to put that in their O&M costs to start with. That 3-year contract alone was priced at $218,000. That's well out of line with what we see utilities usually paying on a yearly basis to maintain the servers, maintain the software programs, and that on a 3-year basis. The plumbing, similar to the HVAC and that trade. Protective coatings, that could be unit cost on our part on material pricing to some degree, but it's also another skilled trade area. The concrete pricing is associated with two things, and one was the pricing of the contract, but I think the bigger part was constructability. We depressed all the chemical areas, and then they priced it with the number of formwork lifts, and our unit costs for that type of stuff were different than the low bidders. These areas, this last slide is really associated with the building wall systems in the building itself, and you see the differences and the range of differences between our estimated pricing through our architect and what they actually came out to be. But just in those skilled trade areas, there's a good part of the difference between our bid and the apparent low bid. So what we're seeing, to answer your question on is it in materials or the labor, it is in a degree of the materials in those products, but a lot of it is getting the labor and putting the labor into getting the project built. Our wall system would have required, the one the architect came up with, several different trades between the studs and the membrane flashing and the different specialty contractors that would need to do that system. The siding itself came in from a different an outside specialty source. I think when you add all of those trades and up together versus something like a metal building where you have a single trade doing it, we saw a lot of price increase. That appears consistent with the building trades that are going on. I know Eugene's Justice Center is well over its cost. As I've been exploring that part of the industry, as I understand, the health science building at the University of Washington just came in well over the estimates for that building itself. So the storefront area that we had in the water treatment plant is extremely high priced right now. But that in a nutshell is a a good part of the pricing. The other part is that we made this treatment plant expandable, and that expandability, the design criteria is 4.5 MGD with the ability to quickly go to 6 and then on up to 8. So in looking at that, my question to the design staff was how much did that cost us and how much over design was there? Do we actually have a 6 or an 8 MGD plant? We really don't, but we do have additional floor space in the building, and since the building component is what's costing us so much money, it relates to 30 or 40% increase in the cost of that facility. The membranes themselves, if you remember, came in well under our estimate, and so the membranes, the process components are well in line with what we've estimated. There are ways to reduce those costs and even, in fact, reduce some of the membrane costs as we move forward. But I don't know how long, the crystal ball we have obviously isn't very good. As I shared with some people, the only staff member we don't have on is the wizard that can tell us and predict the future, which I wish I had. But most of the industry is saying that this is here for a while, and we're going to see this pricing and these pricing structures stay around until there's more skilled labor in the trade. And we've seen it up through California and along the West Coast. I assume there's other places in the country that are experiencing the same shortages in labor and high pricing. Before we go to what we could do to reduce costs, are there any questions, any other things? Yeah.
Have you calculated at this juncture the cost of the rapid expandability
We did.
versus
Yeah.
what it would cost to make retrofits to expand that at a later junction?
We haven't done an analysis, comparative analysis. What we did was look back and see if we had properly sized the equipment so that we didn't have oversized equipment. As we go through on what we can do to reduce costs, we do have too much building space. And we'll be reducing that, I believe, because we allowed room for one additional rack. In the rest of it, it's really, and we've sized the piping for 8 MGD. And to reduce the piping for 4.5, a lot of that is all buried piping, and some of it's under your floor slabs. So we really don't want to reduce that to downsize it, and you're looking at a size difference. So there is an amount of money to be saved, but that's not really the trade where we're seeing the escalation in prices. Pipe pricing and the people that put in those type of pipes fall within our estimates. So I don't think you're paying a premium for that type of work. It's just like the storage tank. The type of storage tank that we used for the clear well isn't that far off. But again, that's something that we can call for quotes on, and that marketplace isn't as competitive as the building markets now.
What was the square footage of the oversized?
We went from about 16,000 square feet to over 22,000, so about 6,000, about 40%, 30 to 40%. Some of that is related to we wanted better access around the racks. We've got wider spacing between these racks than those in Park City and Clifton, and that's so that we could put a scissor lift down between them and still walk around it. You cannot in those other facilities. There's other things that are related to building size that were related to expandability. It was related to a long-term facility for good maintenance and ease of maintenance. And we can squeeze that out of the building, but...
I was going to say, did we do that for safety, some of all the above, or?
Yeah, some of it's safety, some of it's convenience. You can't work in and around a scissor lift. You should, if you've ever been to a Home Depot, when they use a scissor lift, they block the aisles off. you really should be under the same practices. And so if you've got two people that want to work in the same area, you've got to be cautious of that. Knowing the process was going to be expanded, it's been our experience, you never put enough space in a building, it always gets filled, especially when you're expanding from 6 to 8 MGD. As I've shared with Ron, I believe our estimate, if we'd have known at 60% that the building cost was going to come in that high, we clearly would have changed our avenue on the amenities and the space. The fact that our estimate was off as far as it was led us to believe that we could have those amenities and that convenience, and clearly there's not room for that in the funding limits.
Are you going to talk a little bit about the materials?
For the architect, the construction of the building itself, I can. So the outside material was a composite type material that should have provided 50, 75 years of service with no maintenance to it. Then it had a membrane behind it. It had a metal stud siding, and then on the inside of the most of the process areas in that was a hardy board. And included in the design was a metal stud and a metal framing setup that would allow the contractor in the city to hang pipes, heavy ducts, and electrical runs about anywhere they wanted. In a low bid environment, the reason we do that is we don't like trying to defend a change order from a contractor that comes in and asks for tens of thousands of dollars to put in the pipe support framing. And so we design it into the building. Some of it's used, some of it is not. But it does give the city the flexibility in the future when they want to add a pipe or a heavy conduit run or something else. They can attach it pretty much anywhere they want to the walls. But that is the building framing system that we had.
Rob, did we look at it all with structure versus steel?
Not for a water treatment plant, no.
Yeah, we didn't. We had wood on the interior for the whole admin area. We had wood. It was or at least the wood finish on the inside. So you had wood siding, you had a wood tongue and grooved ceiling of wood planks. It was a very attractive, very nice interior on that part. They again used storefront, so you could see from the admin area or that entrance area into the water treatment plant membrane area, and that storefront ends up being very expensive too. But overall, the architect looked at wood trusses for the long spans, and what they felt was with the loads that we had on them and the spans, that the metal truss system they had would have been more cost effective.
Sometimes wood.
The wood would be?
Sometimes.
Sometimes it can be. I can tell you their preference is to work with wood. And they will work with wood as much as they can. There's a movement in Oregon, there's movement in other areas to go back to laminated wood construction. And it's a more sustainable product. And there's an initiative in Oregon to move facilities to that way, to the laminated wood products. And they're trying to get a new laminated wood industry in the valley. I think there's one fabricator down below Medford now that has got some economic incentive. But in a water plant where we see some humidity and in the chemical areas, it's just not suitable for that. Yeah. And then the spans that we have to have for membranes in the membrane rooms themselves are pretty long and pretty high. That's the other thing that we have is, if you remember the architect's presentation, I went through enveloping the building, trying to cut down free space area. We used a hip building, gives us adequate space over the membranes. It did give us a margin of space at the end of the membranes or the front of the building for aesthetics. instead of just a simple pitched roof in the middle or a flat roof. That HIP added a little bit of money to the project. So concepts for moving forward that we've explored, that we've worked through, and I would say you'll see a range of reduction in here because it's only potential. The building itself, changing the building materials and changing the footprint and changing the slab where we don't have a depressed area for the containment areas, that we have just a basic wall system on a slab on grade. We believe will be in that $1.9 to $2.3 million of reduction. Electrical instrumentation, moving away from smart electrical gear that can, and going down to a reduced level of SCADA, perhaps using the controller that we have in the membranes as our primary control system, and then getting rid of the extended service agreement will yield a $400,000 to $600,000 reduction. HVAC system, I believe we need to move back to a conventional air system. It's not nearly as efficient. But at the pricing that we have for this new system, I can't believe that it would be long-term cost-effective to go to a more efficient heat exchange system for the building if the trade is pricing it at that point. I know there are several process changes we can make. We had included a hot water system for membrane cleaning that gives you the ability not to have to process hot water and get it ready when you do the cleaning. You basically can do it at any time. We can take that out. We had a nice solid settling basin system. We had 2 basins. You could use one and clean or work with the other one. We can do that with dewatering bags and eliminate a majority of that process. We've talked about relocating the raw water pumps over to the intake structure, which we didn't do originally because it is very close to the roadway, and it would make it a lot easier to maintain and service those pumps on the other side of the road away from the traffic flow, but they certainly can be moved back to the structure, or the intake structure. And the cost savings is really not associated with the pumps or the construction of the wet well. It's associated with the fact that we've got a very deep excavation between the intake and the raw water pump station. So we eliminate a bore, we eliminate about a 30-foot deep excavation and the piping between those structures. Putting the pumps at the intake, you go right into the raw water pipeline, which has got nominal burial on it because it's a pressure pipe. So the savings isn't really in the pump station itself, it's in how we connected the 2 facilities and the work required. That yields us about a $4 to $5 million cost reduction on the project. It'll be a substantially different water treatment plant building, but it'll lower those costs quite a bit.
Oh. Oh.
I'm going to guess that that's a rock.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, very big rock.
Wow.
Yeah.
About this big,
Okay.
Where's the police?
Yikes.
Glad I wasn't
You got a
standing out on the
uniform
deck
on.
when that went off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've had things.
side of the building.
I figured there would be. That was loud.
Wow.
It's close to the glass door, too.
Well, who's liable? Let's go see who's knows out there.
Seriously.
I think I'll stay inside.
Can we get $4 or $5 million out of that rock?
Yeah,
I might next
Right.
door from the
exactly, from the whiplash.
this down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's emotional.
That's startling. I don't think I've ever had a rock thrown at me during a presentation.
First for everything.
It's a first for that.
Yeah.
If we get, so if the project cost, and I wouldn't say the project is low bid cost, I would say it's more than the $30 million range. If we can affect the project cost by $4 to $5 million reduction, we still have a $25 million project or somewhere in that range. And to get below that would be substantial changes in components. I'm not sure that we would get down to the current funding limit of 22. That's just the way the market is pricing it right now. I had the Cottage Grove plant that I helped deliver is in a metal building with no interior siding with just bad insulation. At this point, I'm not too sure that that would even reduce it. Putting it in something like that would reduce it down. The processes and process components that we have in are the minimum the state would approve at this point, because we've taken pretreatment out. As a formal pretreatment process, we are pretreating the water with injection right before the membranes. But the rest of the project components and elements are required to meet drinking water regulations. And I believe the quality of equipment that we have in there is what the city would want for long-term operation. It's not elaborate, but it provides reliable service. And we also have redundancy in that because it's your only water supply. So there are redundant pumps, the way we would design most water treatment plants for people. So unfortunately, I don't believe that the project is going to come down in price to the $22 million in the funding limit that we had.
A question on some of these processes that are being changed here. Is there an opportunity to build it into the system so that later on it could be upgraded back to what was originally desired?
We could certainly do that. My concern, so I like that approach. What I've talked to Ron about is coming back with real pricing through value engineering to a rock bottom number that we can build the plant for. And then look at those items that could be added back in, if it's building space for like the hot water tank, if it's more restrooms, locker areas, build back in those items that provide the best value to the city, and you guys can make that decision. But before we say that we can do that, I'd like to get to a rock bottom price for a facility that will deliver water reliably. It may not have a lot of creature comforts to it, and then start adding back in what is of value.
Okay.
So certainly I'd like to do that. The things that we're removing and that we'll be taking off of the project won't affect its ability to produce high quality water. And it will mean that there's a little more attention to operation. So it'll be, you know, as we shrink down aisle spaces, it'll just mean that there's a little more difficulty operating, moving around, getting to things. I can give you an example of the membrane racks themselves were designed to be too deep. They can supply those racks with 3 and 4 deep membrane modules into them. The difficulty is that when you want to get to that back module, you have to take all the other modules out. And it takes a long time then to maintain a membrane rack. We opted not to do that. We opted to just make them too deep so it didn't take that time frame to maintain on one of your membranes. We've talked to the membrane supplier about going back, because they haven't fabricated membrane racks yet, about going back to a design where they've got more membranes on a rack. So
Yeah. One of my concerns is that we don't take so many things out of it that it then becomes an efficiency issue, or that we could save money down the road because of all these new expenses that we have, because we're not doing it the original way. I'm not saying that I'm locked into the way that the original plant was. I'm just concerned that we don't take away things that will actually cost us more in the long run.
Yeah, that was one of the questions that I was asking a while ago, is
Yeah.
what's the trade-off?
Right.
If there's a reduction now,
How much is that going to cost us in the long
but
run?
by doing that, it's going to add X percent over when that expansion
Right.
or growth occurs.
The stuff that's been taken off to date that you see in that $4 to $5 million is not necessarily stuff that's gonna. I take HVAC for example. I mean, if you're paying, let's just say we paid $6,000 a year in HVAC, and the other model was $3,000 a year. I mean, take that $3,000 and over 70 years, you can't even get there on that.
Right.
And the other things that, changing the footprint, when we went through the design process, our big push was we want a plant that is easy to operate. O&M is a big piece of this. Because it doesn't do us any good to reduce the entire capital up front and have a plant that's just going to be a money pit
Right.
after it's
Exactly.
built.
Yeah.
True.
So that was what the whole basis of this design was based.
Sure.
That's what we based it on.
Well, and we have to know what those issues are, and if a decision is made to go forward, what those realistic costs are going to be. We still have a budget that we have to deal with, and we have
Right.
to look at what additional outside revenue can be generated to offset that. But there's still a finite amount of money going to be available. And we may or may not be able to accomplish the project or accomplish the project the way we want to.
Yeah, there is definitely a balancing act. What you have in front of you here, though, I don't see that impacting long-term expansion, to be honest with you.
No, and the the initial effect of shrinking, like aisle spaces or the space behind the rack, in essence, you can walk all the way around these racks at any point in time, the way it's set up now. I believe that can change, and most conventional membrane plants would have maybe a little more limitation on that, which is something that we've learned as we've delivered membrane plants, is it's nice to have that space. Initially, you're going to shut down every day anyway, pretty much. You're going to produce an amount of water through the day. You're going to, your tanks are going to draft down. You're going to fill them the next day. You're not going to run it 24 hours a day. That's our projections. Eventually, you will be running it 24 hours a day. So for the first several years, until growth really kicks in, your plant operators will have time out there to maintain the system, even with a little bit of the reduction in space. There's nothing in the equipment itself or the sizing of the equipment and that these numbers change, as Ron has shared. We're not changing any of the redundancy requirement or criteria, or we haven't. And it would be hard to embrace removing redundant pumps, redundant for your chemical systems, your water systems, your disinfection systems and that, because if you lose one, you're out of production. And we'd never want to put a city in that position. You don't have an alternate water supply. And how long you're going to be out is, if it is a finished water pump, for example, you could be out weeks, not just days or hours. Those elements that are only affect you for an hour or two, we usually just use stock and shell parts for anyway. So we're not reducing any of that. The membranes, the pilot work that we did out here, we know how to make them efficient with the chemical feed systems. We've probably achieved more efficiency in reducing your chemical costs than any other aspect of the design that we have. We know what the optimal chemical treatment is for the plant.
Ron, is those changes that we looked at currently in the original, how would that impact the cost of the management?
We haven't really looked at that. To me, it depends on what we finally end up with. Not a lot. I don't see it as impact. It's not like we'd have to hire 3 more people since we brought this down. I don't even think you'd have to hire 1 more person, to be honest with you. It's just a matter, a lot of it was set up, like Wayne said, so we could get from, be able to get equipment in and out. So now I don't have room to get a scissor lift down there, or I do, and it's really tight and it's cramped. It just makes maintenance a little bit more of an issue, you know. But it's not that it can't be done. It's just that it may just take just a little bit longer. And those are the things that we looked at when we initially designed it. But I think those are areas that you'd probably want to give up rather than, at the end of the day, we need a reliable treatment plant. And if that means that we have maintenance tasks take 10% longer on certain items or 20% longer, then that's what it means. I mean, you have to weigh that against a $9 million shortfall in capital. We can buy a lot of staff for $9 million. We can buy a lot of parts for $9 million, get pretty creative. So to me, we have it at this point, at this juncture where we're at, with what we've got on the table, we haven't given up anything that I really see as aesthetically, yes, but efficiency, not really.
Yeah, aesthetics and what I call creature comforts, locker and shower rooms, lunchroom, training area, that nice entrance area. My guess is that those will all need to be deleted. Those are expensive right now in the trades and in the marketplace.
Yeah, say you move the pumps over to the raw water intake. We don't have the pump station building anymore. So now you've got to pull a raw water pump. Okay, well, it probably requires setting up flaggers out on River Road now and getting a crane out there to pull a pump in the middle of River Road. So it's those kinds of things that we're going to run into. Is it insurmountable? No. Are we going to be pulling raw water pumps but once maybe every 5 years? So you got to look at those. I mean, we put that building over there because we got the 2.5 acres. I mean, why not make it convenient and fit it in there and make it to where you can get in and out of it easy? But if dollars dictate that this is still efficient, we can still maintain it, and we can still do it, then it probably makes sense to look at that as an idea. Absolutely. You always do something different.
You could always do it later.
So we better move forward with the rest of this before the council meeting starts. I wanted to give you a quick update on funding. Basically, like Wayne said, if you assume that we're in that $30 million range with the plant that we have designed on paper, what we've effected to date is roughly $25 million. We've got $22 million available in funding right now. That's just for the treatment plant and the intake. Additional funds are needed. I have heard in August we're going to go back before the IFA board. They've indicated that it would be fairly likely, without too much pain or headache, for us to get another $3 million at the 1% interest. So that's no guarantee, but that we're working that angle. We're also working with the Cheetah Lake URD boundary amendment, and then there's potential for internal loans from street SDCs and whatnot. Really what that boils down to is we're trying to do this without any additional rate increases. And we'll continue to work those angles until we've exhausted, until we can't get there any further. But at this point, it looks like we could add $3 to $5 million, potentially without rate increases. But we can't guarantee that. We don't know what IFA is going to require at this point.
You're shooting for $25 million?
$25 million for construction. I think that's, we've gone through it. We've beat our heads up. Wayne's beat his head up. And I think that's going to be a very simplistic building. I think that's reality where we're going to be. Yeah, that's what we're shooting for. And I'll kind of get you a little bit closer on how we think we'll get there.
So a $45 million cost reduction and something in the neighborhood of $3 million revenue enhancement.
Probably 3 to 5.
3 to 5 revenue enhancement.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That gets you to roughly that 25. That leaves you $2 million in contingencies. And I'll fight to the bitter end to tell you never go into a project this size without at least that, and at least until we know. We don't want to ever be put in a spot where we're having to do some kind of an emergency rate increase or something like that. I don't want to put anybody in that spot. And if we don't spend it, you just don't take the loan, or you You know, you do it with cash or whatever we do, pay back the loan early. But we need to be prepared for that.
Will we go up for another bid, or how will that work?
Yeah, let me go through that. So basically, we got two options in moving forward, is the way we see it. And you got the design bid build, which is basically what we just went through. Call it a redesign. I see some issues with that at this point. It requires quite a redesign effort. It's additional time. I think you're likely to get not as many contractors bid it. I mean, I would venture a guess that the bottom 3 or 4 that bid it last time are probably going to say, yeah, no, we can't get there. So they're not necessarily going to bid it. The one thing it does do is the project you put out with the bid pool that bids it, that gives you the lowest bid price. That's the lowest price. That's not necessarily at that point, but that's what that gives you. What we're looking at is the other option, which is an alternative bid delivery, CMGC. It was the same way our Justice Center and Library were delivered. It requires the City Council, i.e. the Contracting Review Board, to exempt from competitive bidding per ORS 279. So this is pretty standard. You know, we call it alternative bid delivery. A lot of agencies are using this as a bid delivery system right now. It's an RFP process, so you put a proposal out, and it's based on, I think if council were to approve, we would base ours primarily on qualifications. You use a percentage of it as costs when you're scoring the RFPs.
And you'd be pre-qualified bidders?
Yeah, basically your pre-qualification in your RFP is, you know, you've done so many water plants, you've done, you know, projects this size, and give us examples, give us innovative ways that you think that we can bring these costs down, stay on track. It's actually a pretty common approach. The more that I dug into it, it's pretty standard for larger buildings. So it's a two-phased approach. Basically what you do, like we said, you get a construction manager, general contractor on board. It's a little different in this situation. We're asking them to come on board and do the value engineering for us. We all feel that it's time to have a contractor come in and help us with that piece, and there's a lot of contractors out there that do that. We need real-time pricing. I mean, we can sit and get quotes. I've called and get quotes on stuff all the time, and then you get the bid from the same contractor that gave you the quote that he got, and it's 20% less or 20% more. So I don't know that that really does us any good at this point. I think at this point we've engineered it to death, I'll say, and it's time to get a contractor on board that can help us get it to a situation where we can build it. So those are kind of the phases, and I'm going to kind of rush through this since we're running out of time here. So in the first phase of this, basically we'd go through, score an RFP. It's likely that you wouldn't have a lot of RFPs in this case. Proposers, possibly. I mean, there is that possibility. I don't think it limits competition. I think there's a few firms out there that do that, and they essentially quote out all the pieces of the contract, you know, but they are guaranteed a price up front. So there's that that we'd have to look at. And once we get to a spot where we think that we've got it down as far as we can, we enter into a guaranteed maximum price with that contractor. A couple things that does. It's pretty low risk on change orders at that point, unless something really crazy happens, because they've been a part of the process and they've showed us what they can do, and they are there with the drawing, and very slim chances of major change orders. We could have used it initially, but there was really no need to. Looking back, there was, but there was really no need to in terms of timing. It would have been really weird with the way we switched our intake and whatnot to have a contractor on board and all the delays that are associated with that. So, and then this kind of, the backside gives you a little bit of process and what we were thinking about in terms of a CMGC, publish the findings, hold a public hearing, contracting board, i.e. city council, and then you do a competitive selection of a CMGC firm and go that route. If you look at the next one, our schedule is fairly aggressive. Our goal would be to have a contractor with a guaranteed maximum price on board by February of 2017 and moving forward. So we're ready to hit the in-water work period and build this thing and not lose any more time. So in a nutshell, that's kind of where we're at. We've got a couple more minutes. If you guys have other questions, please.
Mayor,
Yes.
I have used this CMGC approach in most of our hospital work. It has, I think, allows the greatest flexibility and provides the best opportunity for cost control.
Absolutely.
So those, I think, are the
It's
big
definitely not
advantages.
your lowest. It's not going to be, somebody could always come in and lower bid that, but we know what we can get to. We need to be able to control the cost at this point, and that's what the CMGC does for us.
Is there any other questions? We need to wrap up so we can take a couple minute break.
I totally agree with Ron and Bob that they work very well for us in our jail and library district center.
Okay.
Value engineering, cost analysis, is going to get us much closer.
Yeah.
Let's get her done.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Ron. We'll adjourn
Yes,
the
thank you.
work session.